a lot of what I'm doing right now is I believe that God has given me the ability to make money relatively easily. And I feel like I need to do that and actually act on it, mainly to give the majority away to charity.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm honored to have our guest today, Mr. Dave Homyak. Dave, how are you doing today?
Great, Phil. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to get into some different topics here we'll talk about. So for our listeners, Dave, real estate investor, developer, syndicator, short-term rental specialist, idea combiner, also owner of a virtual assistant company. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But Dave, you have a really interesting story and background, and I think you want to convey like when to start, why to start, risks, rewards, stuff like that. So before we get into how you started into real estate, take me back and kind of give me more of a backstory that ultimately led up to your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. The first time I read a book about real estate was at 16. It was a green covered book. It talked about how to make money by buying apartments. That would have been early 80s. It might even have been 70s. It was my dad's book. I'm like, I'm going to do this when I get done with college. And I'm going to do this after I get a girlfriend. And then I'm going to do this after I get married and have kids. And then when they're older. And bottom line is I had a bunch of excuses and I had a lot of anxiety. And I ended up writing a couple offers on places and always backed out, never closed on anything. So at the age of 52, I had never purchased anything other than a primary residence. And that is not a good trajectory for for becoming financially independent if that's your goal. And I strongly recommend people try financial independence because it is a wonderful thing. It takes a lot of pressure away.
So I'm excited to talk about after age 52, but you skipped 36 years there, or you summarized 36 years. So from 16 to 52, did I do the math right on that? I think I did. So during that time period, did you always want to do something where did you stop looking at things for a decade at a time, or was it always in the back of your mind? Like what was your thought process through your kind of young adult life?
Yeah. So great question. And hopefully this allows us to explore more why real estate is so powerful and why some of my thoughts were flawed, and the main reason being leverage. But basically, I was like, every 5-10 years, I'd look at real estate, and I'd be like, man, but I can just invest in S&P 500, and it's knocking out 7%, and I don't know, and if a house goes up, it's going up, 3-4%. But I'm forgetting about this whole leverage thing, right? You're only putting 10% down. First property I ended up buying, 10% down, $300,000, put $30,000 down, sold that for 3 years later for 706, right? Oh, turned 30,000 into more than 300. Oh, that was not, can't do that in the S&P 500 unless something horrible happens, and you probably don't want it to happen.
I think leveraged appreciation is really misunderstood.
And depreciation, absolutely.
Yeah, and depreciation. And I'll maybe just explain it just to make sure we're on the same page, but let's just say something is $100K. I know there's not a lot of real estate that costs $100K, but for simplicity, if you put, let's say 20% down today, $100K, but it appreciates by just 3%, that's $3,000 over the 20K down, right? All of a sudden you have a 15% return just on the appreciation, and you have cash flow, principal pay down. So it's not that challenging as long as the property cash flows to get to a 20-25% return because of leverage, right?
Exactly.
So you just didn't know that. You just didn't understand that, or it wasn't real to you. What was, yeah, tell me more about that.
I I don't think I understood it. Yeah, I know I didn't understand it. I like if I would have understood that, I'd be like, oh, that's a complaint. And I was also like, I don't want to have to worry about, a clogged up toilet or whatever else, right? It's just like, it's so much easier to just invest in this S&P 500 index thing and let things roll.
Yep.
But yeah, and then the other piece that we just started to mention too is then when you actually make a bunch of money, there's this depreciation
Yeah.
thing that you get to make this income and then you get to subtract this depreciation that is phantom and actually the property isn't depreciating, it's going up, but you don't have to pay taxes
Right.
on a certain amount of money. And that makes it, bottom line is to replace your engineering income, you don't need to have that much money coming in. You can have less money coming in because you're not paying tax on a bunch of it, depending on the depreciation that you're throwing at it.
Yeah. And I would say that when I started real estate, I had started listening to different podcasts and stuff. So I heard people talk about it, just like maybe people are hearing
Mm,
about it right now. But I didn't really understand it. And I didn't really understand the value of both the leverage and the depreciation until probably 2, 3, 4 years into my real estate journey where I was like, oh, I get to write this off. I get to depreciate this. Or,
mm.
oh, the market went up by this, but my return on my investment is much higher, right? And then I was, engineering background like you, where I started to do the math and see how things work. Like it just kind of started to click. Like, oh, I need to do more of this.
Should we tell your listeners how to get a free down payment for a house?
Go for it. Yeah, I want to hear it.
Okay, so there's, you can buy an RV in outdoorsy is the equivalent of Airbnb. You buy the RV, you put 10% down. 60% of that would be 60% of that amount would be allowed to have bonus depreciation on it. So you put 10,000 down on a $100,000 van, and you get to deduct 60,000 this year off your income because you're using it as a business and renting it out. Guess what? There's your down payment for something. I don't know how big of a down payment. It depends on your tax bracket, but I mean, in theory, 60,000 at, let's call it 25%, you get 15,000 back. So you're getting your down payment back at tax time. I'm planning on doing that this year.
Yeah, there's all kind.
Uh,
I mean, there's all kinds of ways to get into real estate to get. I mean, take advantage of the tax law and just. I think
yeah.
the main mess, the understanding this stuff and honestly taking some action as you start to take action, you start to learn these things more and more. Dave, I want to go
Hmm.
back to your story a little bit because you said the word, so if I may, you talked about anxiety and just kind of, maybe risk averseness.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, what more are you willing to tell our listeners about that and kind of how you work through that?
Yeah, I very vividly remember buying the first property and being scared, right? The people that were operating it were selling it not because it was performing highly. They had a really bad pricing strategy. They were making 42,000 a year, which should cover all my expenses, but I wouldn't make anything. And I remember very vividly thinking, what if I buy this and I never rent it out another night? Which was just a ridiculous
Right.
thought to even have because
Yep.
that's not gonna happen.
Right.
It's like a meteor would have to land on the cabin. That's the only way I don't rent it out another night. But I'm like, what if I can't rent it out another night? And I'm like, okay, maybe at that point I have to put it back on the market, eat the real estate commissions again, and I lose 20, 30,000. And then it was, okay, well, what's the upside? So downside is lose 30,000, which wasn't even real. Just in my head, it was. The upside is this works and I buy a couple more and I get to quit engineering and I've replaced my engineering income with real estate. The thing that I would do differently now is run that by some other people. Hey, stress test this thing. Hey, Phil, what do you think of this idea? And luckily, we have a group of guys that we can do that with. But the other big thing is just everybody needs to the easiest way to make money is R&D, right? Rip off and duplicate. See what
Yep.
the other guys are doing. Do the same thing. You don't have to invent the wheel. You don't have to do anything exciting and snazzy. Oh, this is why nobody else is doing this, and I just found out and lost a lot of money. Just do the same thing the other guys are doing, and they'll point you in the right direction.
Did you when you thought about, so you said you had anxiety or just fear, you were very scared when you bought that first property
Hmm.
and you thought the risk was losing 30K, probably not reality, but did you understand the upside and what the upside could look like at that time?
I had no idea it was going to be generating 55, 60% cash on cash. The other advice I would give to your listeners is if you ever start buying stuff and it's generating 55 to 60% cash on cash, buy all you can. Don't
Right.
buy three and stop and say,
Yeah.
I'll get one a year or two from now. And no, they're going up. Other people are going to be
Find a
happy
way
to
to
take
buy it.
45%, 40. And there was very quickly in my head, there's a half dozen people that said, I'll be happy to buy something. You just run it. And I go, oh, I just hate to lose money for you. If there's, so I mean, there was a half dozen people that said, you pick whatever you want and buy it. We will split it 50-50. I'll provide the funds and I will get the loan for it. And I turned everybody down. I'm
I
like,
think
I
we're
don't,
I think we're
oh,
making that offer to the listeners right now, aren't we, Dave? If you find something that's 50 to 60% cash flow, give us a call.
Dave Homyak on Facebook. I'm the guy standing there on the roof with the sunset. Click DM me, man. Hook me up. I will be happy to fund you.
But I think there's
We're gonna bring Phil in too.
yeah, I think that however you guys want to do it. I think there's just a lesson there though. Is like you were throughout the whole process, both buying the first property and then even how you started to grow. And I don't, you could say, well, you regret not starting earlier, other things, but at the same time, you're doing pretty well right now. So maybe there was a reason for that. You learned a lot, whatever it may be. But um, I think just taking action and learning from it and then trying to figure out different ways to do things. I know you talk about that. You're an idea combiner, you say. So tell me more about, yeah, how would you do that? Or even what does an idea combiner mean? And how have you leveraged that?
Basically, people will, you know, there are two separate things going on. And I'm like, hey, do you realize that these are actually related? And if you put these two together, they're way more powerful. So, even just combining different people, there's a guy I know that's killing it in New York with apartments, and what he's doing is relatively unique and could be easily a course, but he doesn't want to do the course. And then I know a guy that has a course. So it's like almost like getting the people together. There was a play with American Express membership rewards points, and some friends of mine were getting a bunch. And I'm like, oh, do you realize if you get the Charles Schwab card, you can cash them out at 1.25 cents. They're like, no way. Right. So just knowing that these things are out there and hey, and when you do that, guess what? You're now appreciated and you know, ingratiated. Is that a word? To
Yeah.
them where they're like, they want to help you out later. And hey, by the way, have you thought of this or done this? And you're sharing deals and you're helping. So
Yeah, I
I
think
find that helping those guys is ideal for growing relationships.
yeah, and I think just, I like the book The Go-Giver. They talk about the main character is a connector. He's always connecting
Mm,
people, like identifying different people and their challenges, but also their strengths and saying, hey, this person with this challenge can talk to this person with that same strength or the other person with a challenge. And he's just connecting people that can work together. And maybe you're not involved. Like that doesn't need to be transactional. You don't need to make money on every time you just connect somebody, but you're
right.
building, you're building the reputation and being the person that's adding value to other people's lives. So they're in the back of their mind, they're thinking, how can I add value to Dave's life if
Hmm.
he's providing value to me in different ways? Is that an accurate like understanding of it?
It is an accurate understanding. I mean, but I don't do it because I might get value back. I do it because I just think it's fun, and it's always good to help other people. So I'm not doing it to try to get somebody to give me something later, though. I think if you do it for that, that might mess it
Agreed.
up a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, that isn't my intention at all. It's just like, are you aware of this? I think this is pretty cool. They're like, oh, thank you.
Yep, agreed, 100%. Well, so idea combiner, and you talk a lot about adding value. So your first property, if I go back to that, was a short-term rental. Is that right? Can you tell me more about the
Right.
deal and kind of some specifics and where you went from there?
Yeah, basically the people that had it before me, they were making, I think, 42,000 a year with it. And by doing some very simple price changes, I took it to 60,000 the first year. And I bought that in May of 18. Uh, Decided to get another one in August of 18, and then that one went really well. And then decided to get another one in November of 18, and that one went insanely well. And there's no there shouldn't have been a surprise to me, but basically, if you get something that has just been remodeled and everything is brand new in it, it rents better than something with really old furniture that doesn't look as good. Big secret there revealed to all your
Yep.
listeners. And then after that, so bottom line is I made the decision to leave March of 18, bought those three properties, May, August, November, and then February of 19, I left General Motors with a buyout and ended up getting on a bunch of podcasts because people thought it was entertaining that I'd replaced my engineering income 11 months after I made the decision and 9 months after the first purchase. So I got a bunch of people, and this was unexpected. I got a bunch of people that reached out and said, if you're able to do that, can you help me pick the best stuff? Because obviously you're picking pretty good stuff. And I said, sure, no problem. So I helped probably about 100 people. I never added it up, but roughly 100 people buy stuff in
Wow.
the Smokies. And what ended up coming out of that, so that was an unexpected second replacement of my engineering income. And what ended up coming out of that is I was doing a bunch of math. It basically, it's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward formulas. And I didn't want to do the math anymore. And so I hired a virtual assistant, a remote worker, happened to be from the Philippines. And basically, I set up a Google Sheet and I put in formulas and I said, just put in these numbers, and the math happened automatically. Then there's another thing called conditional formatting, which just, the ratios below this number turns green. It means it's a good deal. And if it turns red, it's a bad deal. 95% of stuff turns red, 5% of stuff turns green. I analyze every property that's come on the market since 2021. So to this day, we still analyze every property coming on the market.
Wow.
Well, my virtual assistant does. And then when somebody says I need something between a million and a million two, I take a look, and 95% of the stuff's eliminated. I only have to double check the best stuff.
So first of all, took you 36 years after reading the book to make the decision you're going to buy real estate, and it took you 2 months to buy the first property, 3 months, 3 months, quit 3 months later, basically,
Mm-hmm.
rounded. Like, so 36 years, then condensed all of a sudden to a couple months at a time, and you're making decision moving. And then, you know, really what you were doing is just adding a lot of value to other people, 100 people or close to 100 people, pretty darn
Mm.
neat. And then you're saying, okay, I want to keep adding value, but I don't want to spend as much time as I am doing it, because it was probably becoming time consuming for you. So you figured out a different way to do that. So now at this time you have a virtual assistant working for you at this time, and then
Right.
that kind of continues to evolve to either more assistants working for you or for others. Tell me what happened next.
Right. So I'm completely clueless, right? I have no idea what's going on. And it's interesting when you have somebody helping you. Basically, it allows you to have more time to see what's going on. So at the time, she was absolutely amazing. So a friend of mine put on Facebook, I have two absolute rock star VAs, uh, 13 years experience. My business model's changing. Can somebody use one? And I'm like, I think I want an experienced person. And she was way more expensive than a regular person. But our very first conversation was, uh, you know, basically, what time zone am I in? Eastern. Okay, I'm planning on working from you from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. unless you think by shifting my hours I can be more effective for you. And then the okay, sounds good to me, beats me. And then the second part was, what do you need help with? And I said, well, my email. Well, what specifically? And I said three things. And she's very gentle with me, right? So she's like, well, we could do those three things, or we could do these five other things. But if you really want to do those three things, no, I don't want to do those three things. I want to do the thing that you have 13 years experience helping other people through that. So she's giving me feedback. I have the ideas. I don't know how to best even implement what I'm wanting. She has that experience. That's the special sauce, is getting people to give you feedback. We can do your idea. This might be a little better because I've done this a bunch, right? So she starts working for me. I go to lunch monthly with a bunch of guys in Ann Arbor, and I'm like, she's the most amazing person ever. Oh my gosh, yeah, this is cool. And three guys are like, do you think she can get me one? I'm like, I have no idea. So I'm like, Jess, do you think you can get these guys one? She's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So the first three people, or the first three remote workers, I hand off to my buddies kind of in Ann Arbor. And the conversation at the end is always the same. Dave, what do I owe you? Nothing. Don't worry about it. I have no idea I have a business.
Right.
Another guy has to say, his name's Brent, and he's like, Dave, you do realize you have a virtual assistant placement company and you're providing a valuable service and you need to start charging money. And I'm like, no, I had no idea. It like completely shocked me. News to me. I'm like, oh. And then so I started charging and people kept paying. And since then we've placed 130 some VAs in the last less than 2 years. Never advertised. It's all word of mouth or referrals. We get a ton of referrals. We had a ton of people that are like, every worker that quits, we're just replacing with one of your workers because they are the easiest to train. It's incredible, right? So it's like you can get, there's a stereotypical virtual assistant, which is let me see what the least I can pay, and I'm going to work my butt off to train them, and maybe they work out and maybe they don't. One of my most interesting calls was from a client of ours now that called and said, I've had 5 virtual assistants and I've had to fire them all. Why should I get one from you? And I'm like, how much time did you spend training 5 virtual assistants? Wouldn't you like to train them in half the time and they stay because they're actually competent and they pick up exactly what you're doing? So I think people are undervaluing what their time is worth. Your time to train a VA that stays and is really good, it's going to take less time than training somebody that may or may not work out. So yeah, this excites me because I'm like, this is a super powerful tool to get you to the next level of whatever your business is. And it's whether you just have more time to think and you're buying yourself more time. It's whether you get more time to do what you're best at to make more money, or you just cut your hours by 15, 20 hours a week, and all of a sudden you get to spend more time with your family, exercise, whatever that is.
Yep. And so your model is highly educated, maybe highly educated and experienced and well paid relative to like the market or the economy that they're in, correct?
Exactly. If they don't have 5 years experience, we don't talk to them. The other thing we do is we slightly overpay. So we do an individualized job description for each of our clients that comes in. On average, we get over 140 people to apply for each job.
Wow.
And then we throw, a bunch of different screening processes, one of which is an intermetrics test, which, Phil, for your listeners, the first 100 listeners that use the referral link in your show notes, they will get a free intermetrics test. That's at $290. If you went online and paid for it, it'd be $295. It combines 3 of the world's best profile tools. We use that to screen every virtual assistant, and then we cater that to the client to make sure that those personalities match.
So if I was to use your company, you would do an intermetrics test on me, and then you would do it on the role and the potential candidates for the job to see if they match my personality, or
we do it on the virtual assistants to make sure that they have the characteristics that you're looking for.
Okay.
So basically, if you're a innovator, we need an attention to detail person. If you're more an attention to detail person, we need a wider thinker. And there's a bunch of other things that we're looking for. But bottom line is you don't want to stick somebody entrepreneurial with anybody with a business that's really good, because then they decide they want to start a business like that or whatever. You want the guy that wants the regular paycheck, the man or woman that wants the regular paycheck, likes the steady stuff, likes to support you and do that. So, I mean, that's, part of the lessons we have learned.
And then what kind of roles are, so virtual assistant, and I think it's virtual because it's not local, but then assistant, people might think, okay, this is just like an admin or but what are the roles that a virtual assistant can all play?
Virtual assistant, and I prefer remote worker, even though it is the Rockstar VAs.
Yep.
So, our biggest win by far dollar-wise was I have a client in Tampa. He was paying an architectural firm $125 an hour to draw his development drawings. We found him a licensed architect from the Philippines for under $20 an hour. So it's like 80, 90% off. I don't know exactly what the math is on that. Probably closer to 80 than 90. My personal favorite that I recommend to everybody that it remotely fits is if your business grows, why don't you hire a manager that has 5 years experience managing other people? One of the things I found right away is I hired a virtual assistant. I hired a second one. I happen to have 7 that work for me now, but I have a manager that runs the other 6. I do not want to be checking 6 or 7 virtual assistants quality of work, right? I want somebody else that I know and trust to do that, that can communicate, get all that going. So hire the manager first. You teach the manager everything. They're responsible for the other hires because they're the person that's going to have to deal with these people. And if somebody's sick, they can fill in for them. They can double check their work. I've had my manager come to me and say, you assigned several hours for this task every day. There's actually less work in that area right now. I suggest we move some of their work time over to VA screening for the company because we're running behind on that.
Yeah.
I love that. I would have never known it. They
Right.
would have just said, yeah, I'm doing this for 2 hours. And in reality, they're doing it for 40 minutes.
I like that. So hire the manager, and you have a process. So you have remote workers that are management level, so they might even have more experience, and you're basically training them, whether that's 3 months, 6 months, however long it takes them to grow into the role of all the different functions. I mean, they can support marketing, bookkeeping, right? I mean,
Exactly.
maybe even architecture, although that might be a specialist, but a lot of different roles within the company. And then if those get to be too much for that one person, they can go hire the full-time bookkeeper that just does that.
Exactly. So yeah, so the typical categories that we have are a management person, social media, bookkeeping, and then an executive assistant. Those are the 4 most common ones, but we handle and can provide for just about anything else. The other thing is you have different software out there, and we'll put in there must be proficient at HubSpot or Trulio, whatever. And then we put that in there. And then if they don't have experience in that, we don't even talk to them. So I mean, you're getting people that already know the software. It isn't like, let me try to train this person from scratch on this thing. Nope, you're getting an expert. There are people that are on there that we've hired that either worked for or they worked for Airbnb and now don't work for Airbnb, but
Yeah.
they still had their contacts at Airbnb. And that's a very magical thing when you need things to happen that and you're running up against a dead end, right? And you're like, can you you know, there's some fun stuff that can
Well,
occur.
the other thing that I mean I like about the model is you can start this, people think, okay, when do I hire my first employee? And that can take a long time to
Mhm.
be able to afford an employee, especially if it's a local person. Whereas if someone
Mhm.
maybe has 3 STRs or 5 STRs or 10 rental properties or even less than that, they can afford the help much sooner now because of this, which will just accelerate the growth. And I think you can people hire a full-time person or part-time? How does that work?
Great question. So most companies you can only get full time only. We actually have full time, we have half time, and then we actually have social media and bookkeeping by the hour because most people don't need them for a full time or half time. There's actually 2 clients that have full time bookkeepers because their books are that complex. But we offer a wide variety, and you're still getting super high quality, 5 years experience minimum in whatever skill set you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, again, I like it because you can get, it's not, it's, it's more expensive. It's not the cheap model there, but it's way more cost effective and less expensive than if you're gonna, thinking, okay, I have to pay someone X dollars a year that's more local. So I think there's an opportunity for that. I wanna, I also want to talk about, so you started with short-term rentals specifically. Now, what does your real estate portfolio look like now? Is it mostly short-term rentals? Is it a hot? You can't see him smiling. He's chuckling. He's a true entrepreneur, and I'm guessing it's going all over the place. So let's hear it.
Well, the other thing, my portfolio today is it will be different in 48 hours, and we discussed that a little bit. Yeah, so I'm having to liquidate some properties. I'm
At the peak, what was it at? What was your peak of your real estate portfolio?
I was never a I hate the how many doors do you have?
Yeah.
Like I'm taller than it's something else that's longer or whatever. But I was more like, tell me about your cash flow per door, right?
Yeah.
So the most the most cabins I've ever owned at one time is four, but I've 1031'd into some really big stuff, right? So I have, a couple 5 bedrooms. One has the best views in the Smokies or the equivalent of the best views, and nobody's going to beat my views. I have an 8 bedroom. I have another 4 bedroom in Kentucky. I won't be able to say that 24 hours from now, meeting the notary to sign that over and split up some funds here shortly. Uh, yeah, so I also, in my mind, the two easiest ways to make money right now, I actually have a development in Gatlinburg, and if you can get some land entitled, and for those that don't know what that means, it just means what can you do with it? You buy 20 acres of dirt. What can you do with that dirt? Well, can you put self-storage on it? Can you put cabins on it? Can you put a wedding venue on it? I don't know. Let's figure that out. So it takes, year and a half, 2 years. In our case, we were trying to put 7 cabins on the ridge of a mountain, and because the ridge lots are worth significantly more than valley lots or lack of view lots, so we tried for 7. They kicked it back. Then we went for 5. They granted the 5. It just got granted very recently. So yeah, so getting land entitled takes a while. You better have some deep pockets. You better have a way to generate the money to fund that thing for a couple of years while you're trying to work through all that. The other way to do it is to basically get it under contract and say, I'm going to spend the money to try to get it entitled, and I'm willing to pay a fair price, but I'm only willing to pay the fair price after the entitlement comes through. I know some people that do that very successfully.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is right now you have some stuff going on in, let's just say, Bethesda, Maryland, LA, San Diego, Tampa, St. Pete, where there's housing crunches. And they're saying if certain property is zoned a certain way, we will allow you to knock down the building and put an 11-unit apartment complex up or something like that. So bottom line is there's stuff that's for sale for, let's just make up some numbers that aren't so made up, and I'm not going to say what city it's in, so good luck finding it. But basically, 550 for the building. The land is worth 500, and as soon as you buy it, you turn in the permit that you want to build an 11-unit apartment complex on it, and the land is worth 800 after it gets entitled, and you paid 550, and you had a building on it that you can lease out or not in the
Right.
interim. So I mean, there's some really interesting optimization of land plays or adding accessory dwelling units, ADUs in the back, whatever. Either way is good. Even just adding a bedroom into a basement, put in an egress window. I'm in Ann Arbor. I was talking to my buddy. I'm like, I'm toying with buying something here. I'm going to get something someplace else as well. But and I'm like, I don't know about the cash flow. He's like, dude, you can make anything cash flow. You throw in egress, an egress window or two, make a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in the basement, and you're renting that out for 1,500 a month. 1,500 a month covers 200,000 worth of 30-year mortgage at
Right.
7.5, 8%. So okay, so then I'm paying, and you can buy stuff around here. You can still buy houses around here for 350, 400, something like that. So
Okay.
it's like okay, so and then you when I'm traveling, I rent out the other stuff medium term, month or longer. None of the regulation for short-term rental applies in Ann Arbor if it's for 28-day or more. It's either 28 or 30. I forget. I'll have to look. But either way, I'm covered. So it's okay. I can make my payment, or when I'm there, I'm paying 1,500 a month if I don't want to rent it out. I mean, so
What
there's a
I've
lot more
found,
opportunity than people think.
and I think, yeah, that's you started this with buying a short-term rental, but then that exposes you to maybe one new thing and one new thing, and then kind of
Mm.
an adjacent thing, or you maybe move around, but all of a sudden you're talking about pretty, I would say, they sound like pretty advanced strategies, but really they're not that complex once you kind of are in the real estate space and you start to understand these terms, you start to learn how to connect these dots and say, wait. And if you're what I would say is if you're a problem solver or even an opportunity or a value finder, you can really add equity or add cash flow in a lot of different ways in real estate, regardless of where you're at. So,
Mm.
um, I want to kind of ask some other questions as you think about your journey and kind of your especially your last 6 years, what was what whether it was the first one you talked about or as you continue these additional projects, like what's been your biggest fear, maybe more recently even?
It's interesting what you value as you move through different phases of investing. When I was an engineer, all I wanted was the cash flow to replace my engineering income. And now that I have a couple different streams, it's more like, oh, that's kind of taken care of. Don't really need to worry about that. Probably time to worry about, increasing net worth. So it's more appreciation plays, stuff like that. So you're going through, and there's another another interesting situation that just happened yesterday. And basically I'm representing somebody. There were two offers on an expensive house, 800,000 plus house. And there was a $9,000 difference. One offer was cash. One offer there was financing, but it was a couple $100,000 down. And the agent's like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And that I'm working with and I'm partnered with on this thing. And I'm like, 9,000 is a lot to you, but I know the net worth of the person that has it. That person wants the cash guaranteed.
Right.
They want the cash deal. 9,000 does not mean that much to them. They have a very specific thing they need to buy with that cash. They don't want a 1% risk. A 1% increase in price does not help them. It means a lot to you, but you can't put your head on that person's body and say, these are your values.
I think when you're negotiating with anybody, whether it's with a real estate agent or an owner, whoever it might be, understanding their challenge, their situation, don't assume your problems are their problems, right? They're different. They're coming from a different place. They're selling maybe for a different reason. So understanding those things and crafting an offer around that is so important in real estate in general, I think.
Absolutely.
If you I guess step back, just reflect about what you've done, especially the last 6 years. I mean, helping a lot of people really build up some nice cash flow and equity, I think yourself. How does it make you feel?
It makes me feel wonderful. I am I'm the slightest bit sad that I didn't try this before, but I also don't know if my personality was where it would have needed to be to take the risks that I did. One of the things that I think is super interesting is, and you said it at the beginning, I'm a developer. 3.5 years ago, I was not a developer. And if somebody said, you might be a developer, I would have laughed at them. And basically a deal presented itself and a partnership came about in a way that that person had the building skills and the local knowledge. I was able to raise capital fairly well. But on that deal, what ended up happening is it ended up being 100% owner financing. So I had to put in $3,000 to cover our closing costs.
You have quite the ability to raise some capital there, Dave.
I'm so tough on that capital raise. Oh my goodness. And then some things really fell in our favor on the deal. But I'm like, so this is just an example to your listeners. Like, if you have no idea what you're doing and you can spend 3,000, like the worst that happens is we completely screw up the deal and I lose $3,000. We walk away, the guy gets his land back. The upside is we actually successfully develop this, get it entitled, and get all these lots on the ridge of this mountain. So it's like risk reward is really important. Don't say I won't ever do that. Say I will do any. There's $1 million cabins in the Smokies. I wouldn't buy anything in the Smokies. It's oversaturated. I'm like, would you buy it for $1? Well, yeah, I'll buy it for $1. Okay, now we've established you'll buy it. There's some price in there.
Yep.
I was willing to pay $3,000 to find out whether I could be a developer. I found out I'm actually quite good at, the math, handicapping, making decisions, financial, otherwise, in getting things through. The other piece for me is a lot of what I'm doing right now is I believe that God has given me the ability to make money relatively easily. And I feel like I need to do that and actually act on it, mainly to give the majority away to charity. So I think
I
that's
love
just
it.
where my head is on it. So you know, I drive a 13-year-old car. My clothes are not the best, right? I'm not like I like a place with a view. It doesn't have to be fancy. I do like a nice view. I live in downtown Ann Arbor. I live on the 14th floor. It's amazing views. I hang out on the terrace like every morning, have my coffee there, put on my headphones, do my business meetings there. I like that type of thing, but the rent isn't that much here. Whatever I buy, I don't know. But I mean, it isn't like I got to make money so that I can get nicer stuff and fancier cars and whatever. It's to be able to help others, and I believe that's the reason I was given the skills that I have, is to be able to make some money to help other people that are less fortunate than I
And
am.
honestly, we've talked about this before, but I forget when you said it, but there was you helped sponsor the aerial recovery, a mission
Right,
trip to recover
right,
some human trafficker. Like, so there's horrible things in the world, and just great causes that support those things. And I remember you talking about it with me and just almost getting emotional. Like, yeah, I helped basically a sting operation to help recover
right,
um, women
right.
in a different country get saved basically. So that's
Yeah,
some neat stuff that you can do. It's not about money and what we can do with it. Sure, that's nice, but
right.
when we can do things that like that you did, I think that is super cool.
So yeah, and just to clarify a little bit of the details because it's so powerful. So it was with aerial recovery, and basically, a friend and I donated some money to help fund a mission. Three sex traffickers, child sex traffickers, were caught and convicted, and they're doing multiple years in prison. They normally come in contact with 120 kids, and most importantly, 9 children were returned to their families. And they'd been snatched from different places in South America, so they got to go back to their families. And that I'm like, how can you, for me, I can't. I'm gonna have a really hard I'm gonna have a really hard time buying a new car when I know for less than a new car I can fund another one of these things and 9 kids go home, right? So
Right.
that's just where my head is on all this stuff. So that's what
That,
keeps me going and pushing a little harder than I would normally feel comfortable pushing.
that's an amazing story. And just to clarify that 9 children returned home, that is amazing.
Yeah,
In the future, had these three sex traffickers, not been caught, there would have been another 100 to 120 children that
that
would
they
have
would have
been
come in
trafficked.
contact with.
So
Exactly.
we're talking about a lot of lives impacted. So yeah,
Right.
when you, that's that's honestly an amazing, I was going to say dangerous, but it's an amazing way to compare things because when you have something like that you can do and you compare it to a new car,
Right.
you're like, man, how do I, you can't, you're never going to get a new car again, Dave. You're going to be driving a 25-year-old
No,
vehicle, but
I was I
that's really neat.
yeah, I was the what was I, the financial chair or something at our church, and they asked me to give a talk to try to get people to give more money, and I was like, big screen TV, eternal salvation, you pick. And
Yeah.
that was the talk. And I was like, I'm sure I messed some people's heads up. Man, I can't get the big screen TV.
By the way, just I'm in the market for a new vehicle right now, and now I don't know what to do. So I will thank you for that, Dave. Um, that is awesome. What are you? What are you? I'll come back to that. But what do you think your key factor to success has been?
I guess inquisitiveness, able to analyze risk properly. And I do a bunch of different deals with a bunch of different people. I have a bunch of different businesses, and I am not greedy. And most of the time, the vast majority of time, I'm like, I think, you do this, I do this. It's a great combination. I really don't care about the split. If we get success with this, no matter what the split is, we're both going to make a lot of money and do whatever. You tell me what you think is fair. So I very rarely say I want anything. And the majority of the time, the people come back with either what I might have asked for if they would have forced my hand and said I refuse to do that, or they give me maybe like 5% more than I would have even asked for. So I find that it shows that I value the partnership way more. And then when things get rocky, it goes a lot smoother that way because they know I'm not in it for the money. They know I'm in it for the relationship and hey, we both have complementary skills. I'm not worried about the money, but when we do this multiple times, it's going to be great for both of us. And I've even had partners say, one of us is going to do a lot more work than the other. Let's split it 50-50. And on the next deal, if somebody does way more work, we're going to, we'll
Adjust
shift
it
to
then.
60-40, and I'm like, fine, no problem. So you know what it is right away. And people are leading with, I care about you and I'm not here to pinch you for every penny. And that just says a lot. And that's what I try to exemplify and put out there with my other partners and with the other people I meet in my life, whether we're going to do business or not.
That's really good guidance. Really good guidance. What has been most impactful business or real estate book?
I the thing that has shifted my complete thoughts on kind of life and what I'm doing, and I highly recommend it to everybody, is the book Die with Zero, Bill Perkins. There are so many, the same way there's the virtual assistant stereotype, pay them a couple bucks an hour and work really hard to train them. There's certain things in American society that I thought I was an engineer and a logical thinker, and I was absolutely not. It was like embarrassing to read that book, and I'm like, oh man, that's exactly what I think, and he's making fun of me, and he's right, right. So I mean, the defaults are work until Social Security kicks in, or work until whatever. The next one that I didn't know until I read the book was if you retire with $200,000 or more, on average, you die with more than what you retired with. And then,
Wow.
okay, time to back that out. Did you need to work those last 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years when you were in good health and you could have done all this stuff? And then it's, well, if and bottom line is, this doesn't say retire earlier than you want. This just says do the math, know you can walk out if you want. And if you find something you want to do more with your time, then go to work, then do it. And if you don't find anything, go to work. I have no problem with going to work. I really don't like when people don't do the math and they just let me be the lemming that Dave was and keep walking, and I need more money and I need to build whatever, and no, you don't need nearly as much as you probably think. And
Yeah,
the book just breaks down some of the stereotypes.
and honestly, there's just so many different societal norms that we assume are right and that America
Right.
has right. So we just do it without thinking through it. So when you see a different perspective or read a different perspective, just be open. You might, by the way, you can read that book. I read that book and I agreed with a lot of that, and then I disagreed with some of the things in there too, and
Hmm.
that's completely fine. Question
Right.
your thinking and why. Um, Read books, listen to podcasts, whatever that challenge your thinking, and then decide for yourself what makes sense for you.
Exactly.
What about personal development book?
Personal development would be Do the Impossible by Jason Drees. I love that book. And yeah, that just, I mean, it just gets you thinking significantly bigger. The intro is from a guy that's really famous, used to host the Bigger Pockets
Yeah,
podcast,
yeah.
Brandon Turner, and basically he ran into a guy at a local meetup, and he had bloody knuckles because he was working on his first flip. He'd been working on it almost a year, and he runs into this guy at the local meetup, and he says, "Oh, what do you do?" And the guy says, "Oh, I flip houses." And Brandon's like, "I do too." And he's like, and he asked the guy, "Well, how many have you done?" And he goes, 100. And Brandon's like, "Oh, I'm on my first one. How long have you been doing it?" And he goes, "A year." And Brandon goes, "Me too." And he says, "Didn't you know you're not supposed to do 100 in the first year?" He's like, "I'm really glad nobody told me that," right? There's just a bunch of really high performers and high thinkers that elevate what you think is possible. And when you're surrounded by guys hitting it out of the park, it's a lot easier to do. Just it's normal to do these things that a lot of people would think are way overachieving.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. Dave, how can listeners find out more about you?
Well, if they're interested in the virtual assistant stuff, there's the referral link. They can get the free Intermetrics test if they would like, or they can go to therockstarvas.com. If you want to talk to me, I'm on Facebook, Dave Homyak, Homyak. There's a sunset behind me. Shoot me a DM. Happy to text back and forth if you have any questions or just want to chit chat, whatever. I think that's the main thing. We're on Instagram, the Rockstar VAs. You can see kind of what our marketing guy can do. I mean, we have 70 different things that we rotate through and stuff like that. It's relatively, it's amazing what you get for kind of what you're paying. Amazing content for not that much money. There's a lot of opportunities. There's a term right now that's being used at Chrysler where I used to work. I took a buyout from Chrysler too. I'm very happy that I got 2 buyouts. Chrysler and GM buyouts. Yes. There's a thing LCC.
Okay.
And that stands for least cost country. And this is coming for every place. But it's where can you get this part? Where can you get the engineering done for this? Poland, Mexico. Where can you get the part made for the least cost country? We can make it best in Indonesia. I don't know. I'm just making the countries up. But right now there's outrageous talent in other countries that are offshore. You can get architects for very cheap. You can get a bunch of other people for what's really inexpensive in the United States. The companies that are using these remote workers are going to have a very distinct financial advantage. There's a couple clients I have that are just annihilating. Their competition can't keep up because they're paying very little relatively to very high skilled designers, CAD people, all that stuff. I mean, all that is out there and available. If you want your business to have an advantage, you really need to consider going offshore, whether it's with my company or another company.
Amazing.
Or finding it yourself.
Dave, thanks so much. And we will definitely put the referral link to the Rockstar VAs and Intermetrics test on the podcast notes and show notes. So definitely check that out. And I just want to thank you for coming on. I mean, from talking about, not making a decision for 36 years to making the decision and going fast, your knowledge on real estate and short-term rentals, virtual assistants, honestly, the aerial recovery story, just I could feel the emotion there. So that's really neat, and certainly encourage people to check out that organization as well. They do amazing things. But Dave, I really appreciate the value you have provided to our listeners. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Phil.
For the Mueller Real Estate and Business Podcast, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Mueller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Mueller Real Estate, visit our website at www.muellerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.